Hey, what's up, folks? So I was just on the chess subreddit earlier today, and I saw that someone had tagged me in a comment to a post asking about the Woodpecker method. Some of you guys might know last year I streamed basically my entire training with the book, The Woodpecker Method, going through the whole thing, eventually going through the whole thing on stream. And this is a question that actually gets asked every once in a while on Twitch when I'm streaming nowadays, and people often ask me about it, so I figure I should just make a video about it because I'm kind of tired of answering the same questions over and over again. So if you're not familiar with the Woodpecker Method, it's basically this book. It came out a couple of years ago by two grandmasters, Axel Smith and Hans Tikkanen. And the book itself refers to a specific training method known as the Woodpecker Method, which basically works like this. You take a certain set of exercises, could basically be any number. You try to solve as many as you can over the course of 4 weeks. And you try to work consistently every day, maybe 45 minutes, an hour, whatever you can do. Consistent training is much better than lumping it all in on the weekend. And at the end of the 4 weeks, you simply count the number of exercises you do, whether it's 100, 500, 1,000, whatever it may be, and then you do the exact same set of exercises in 2 weeks, or at least you attempt to finish in 2 weeks. Once you succeed in that, you then take the same exact set again, and then you try to finish it all in 1 week. And you keep doing these cycles until eventually you can do the entire set of exercises in 1 day. So that's the method, and the idea is to incorporate some spaced repetition learning and to really focus on pattern recognition. Now there's all kinds of obvious questions and criticisms you, I think, can naturally come up with, such as why is it beneficial to solve the same exact problems over and over again versus solving different or new problems. I think these are valid questions to be asked, but that is the method as it is prescribed. My view on it is that if your goal is to build pattern recognition, which means recognizing a chess pattern in different situations, then it actually doesn't matter if you are solving the same exact problems over and over again, as long as you're focusing on internalizing and remembering those patterns for the future. So within the book itself, the Woodpecker Method is a bunch of exercises, somewhere around 1,100 or so. And the exercises are actually taken all from the games of World Champions, which I thought was just kind of a cool thing that the authors did. Most of the games the World Champions win, but they're also on the receiving end of a lot of combinations and winning blows. And the book itself is divided into 3 parts of an easy, a medium, and a hard section. Now, my experience going through the exercises was that they definitely ranged quite a bit in terms of their level. I thought the easy section was quite easy, especially for someone at 2400 level. But then once I got into the medium section and especially the difficult section, those problems were challenging, but not so overpowering like I felt like they were unsolvable. Especially by the end, I felt like every single problem in the book was solvable, with the exception of a few duds where the answer was basically that there is no answer and any normal move is fine. With the exception of those problems, I think for the most part, actually, the book had a really good selection of problems. In my opinion, like 98–99% of the exercises are problems that I would give to a student that I find instructive myself. So as far as problem selection goes and choosing positions that had some kind of logical human solution where I feel like I've learned something if I didn't solve the problem and just by going through the moves, as far as that aspect goes, I think the authors did a really good job. So of course, the million-dollar question, do I feel like going through the Woodpecker Method actually helped me? As I mentioned, I went through the whole thing. I streamed everything. It's on my old YouTube channel that you can go check out all of the previous videos. And I ended up finishing the book in all of the cycles in about 32 days. So what I would do is I would stream for about 2 to 3 hours at a time, I think almost every day. And I got through the book, I think the first time around 17 days or so, and then my second cycle took about half of that, maybe 8 days, and I think I finished my third cycle in maybe 4 days. And by the fourth cycle, I just felt so ready that I was quite confident that I could just do the whole book in one sitting. And it ended up taking me about 7.5 hours, which I actually think I went at a pretty relaxed pace. So I'm sure I could have finished it much faster. And then my final accuracy was very good. I did it on Chessable, so it was all counted and very convenient. And I think I scored like 99.6% in terms of getting all of the moves and all of the problems. So do I feel like that whole process, like 32 days of grinding 2-3 hours a day, do I feel like that helped my chess? I guess this is a question that people keep asking. And to me, like, the answer is like so obvious. Like, of course it helped my calculation. I definitely felt by the end of it that I was calculating much cleaner, or at least I was in good form. Now, I can't say that it like fundamentally made me a stronger player. In fact, in terms of my tournament results, I didn't gain any rating since going through the book. Now, I feel like there's a lot of factors that can affect a tournament performance much more than what kind of calculation method you were working with. There are just so many things that can influence your result. But as far as my subjective perception of my own strength as a calculator and being able to find good moves at the board, I felt like I had greatly increased my speed of calculation and my pattern recognition towards the end of completing the Woodpecker method. And I think that's going to be true for anyone that does 2 hours of calculation work a day for a month, you know, skipping 2 to 3 days max. Even if you spend an hour a day of intense calculation where you're focused, you're really trying your hardest to solve the positions at hand, you're going over the solutions afterwards and really trying to figure out what you missed. A month of doing that for an hour a day, I think, is gonna have tremendous value for the great majority of chess players. So that's why it's always been kind of a silly question, is like, of course it helped. Now, can we say that the Woodpecker method is going to help more than just doing regular tactics on chess.com or Lichess or going through any other book out there? I mean, obviously it's very difficult to say, but what I will say is that I really enjoyed the process of going through the book. I like doing the stream. I like that people kept up with it and, you know, would ask me how I'm doing and kind of hold me accountable to my progress. I do feel like that if I didn't stream the whole thing and I was just doing this kind of as my own project, that there would be a really good chance that at some point I would just get bored and not end up finishing the book. But the fact that I started streaming and I told people that I was going to do the whole thing, well, that kind of kept me tied down to the goal at hand. And of course, I'm very happy that that's how it worked out. Now, I will say that I think one of the big reasons why I ended up scoring 99.6% and just totally crushing the Woodpecker method by the end of it was that I actually had developed some kind of memory for almost every problem in the book. I recognized during my fourth cycle a ton of the solutions, and if I didn't know exactly what it was at first, I would have a strong idea of what the solution was and then be able to kind of quickly figure it out. And I don't think that's going to be a common experience for most people that do the Woodpecker method. I don't think you're actually going to get to a point where you're just remembering 1,000 exercises. I think the reason that it happened for me was because while I was streaming, I was discussing my thoughts on each problem and like expressing my feelings. And I think by expressing and verbalizing what I was thinking about each position helped me develop some kind of emotional memory attached to the solution. And I think that's why I ended up having pretty much a really good recall when it came to a lot of the solutions in the book. That said, the process of solving the problems the first, second, and third times, I think definitely helped strengthen my calculation and my pattern recognition quite a bit. And I think it actually showed in some of my games in a couple of months following the streams and when I'd finished the book. This example here comes from a game I played in last year's World Open, and at this point you guys have had some time to think about it, of course, but if you would like more time to think about it uninterrupted, I would encourage you guys to pause the video and keep thinking. And for context, Black's last move was this move Rook AB8. This was move 39. My opponent was actually in pretty serious time trouble in this game. We were about to reach move 40 and gain additional time, so this was the last move that both of us had to make. I had a solid chunk of time here, I think maybe around 20 or 25 minutes or so to make my move, and my opponent basically had the increment, 30 seconds to make his next move. Now with his last move, Rook A B8, his intention was pretty clear. He wants to capture my B6 pawn. In the previous position, it wasn't possible to take this one because after Rook takes B6, Queen takes B6, White would be able to take on G5 here, and it turns out this Queen on D8 was needed to defend the G5 pawn, so White would just snag that one. So Black goes Rook A B8 and implies that he's ready to take the pawn on B6. Now, when your opponent is in time trouble, you often want to pose some kind of trap for them, you know, ask them some kind of question where either they get it wrong or maybe they have to think and possibly flag. But I wasn't really sure what to do here because there wasn't any obvious way to defend the B pawn, and I wasn't really seeing any tricks, so I was trying to figure out what to do. Eventually I came up with a pretty strong solution. So if you guys want more time to think, I would really encourage you to pause the video and try to figure out what White can do here. So after some time thinking, I came up with a really cool idea, starting with the move Queen to D2. Feels like a very hidden move, and I felt very clever, of course, playing this over the board. My opponent looked a little bit perplexed, and I spent maybe a couple seconds before playing Rook takes B6, as was expected. I traded on B6, Rook takes B6, and now I started a bunch of exchanges that I was kind of anticipating with this move Queen D2. First take on G7 here, take on G5. This pressure has been building up for many moves in this game. The knight on H5, pawn on H4, Rook on H2, knight on H3. They're all sitting up, lined up on the H file. And here comes White's idea, knight takes F4. So I was really actually proud of myself for spotting this one really from afar and actually calculating a lot of the consequences from the sacrifice before I'd actually played Queen to D2. Of course, when we got to this moment during the game, I took a few minutes here to kind of recheck my calculation. I know the instinct is always just to blitz out, you know, all the moves you calculated just to show your opponent, but I would encourage you guys to take time and pause and recheck your calculations when you've looked at something from afar, because you never know when you might discover maybe your move doesn't work or maybe you have something else. So knight takes F4. And the idea behind this one is after we take the second pawn on F4, our queen comes in, we're threatening Queen H6 check, followed by just running the G pawn up the board with a really dangerous attack. Now, this position wasn't easy to calculate. You know, I definitely spent a good chunk of time trying to figure out what Black could do here, because Black actually has, you know, a couple of defensive tries. The key move that I think I first considered was bishop to G6, and this one was refuted pretty easily with Queen H6 check, and then taking on G6, knight takes G6, going Queen H7 check, and minimum White is winning back the piece. And nicely, when we take on G6, we'll be covering this B1 square, so we don't have to worry about any checks or counterplay. I think the most annoying move that I spent some time trying to figure out what to do on was Rook to B7. There are other lines here, but basically White is kind of winning in all continuations. This was the move that kind of bothered me because Black tries to defend the second rank, and I wasn't exactly sure what to do. I would encourage you guys to pause the video at this point to try and find the most direct win here for White. There's a couple of winning continuations, but I think the best and direct move here really is satisfying, so you're going to want to pause the video and try to find it for yourself. And again, I'm really happy to say I actually found this idea from afar, again, before I played this Queen D2 move. And this was the kind of calculation that, you know, I had to do in a lot of the more difficult problems in the Woodpecker method. Sometimes they would require you to find deep resources, deep tactics, when you've already calculated multiple variations, multiple branches, and then on move 6 of the combination, you have to find the key move Rook H8, you know, in a position like this. which wins quite beautifully, hitting the knight with queen takes f8 as a threat. And of course, if black takes the rook, then we have queen takes f8 with checkmate. Not the only winning move. White has other ways to win the game as well, but definitely the most elegant and the most forcing. If black goes rook f7, for example, then cuts off the king's escape square, and we have queen h6 mate. So yeah, I was really happy to have found this one. Actually, in the game, black ended up playing rook b8, which I don't think is a better defense, as it just loses to rook h8 anyway. And my opponent, very sportsman like, took the rook and allowed me to actually put mate on the board, which was really satisfying. So this was, I think, a kind of example of like a combination that, not that I couldn't calculate this one, you know, before I went through the Woodpecker method, but I'm not sure I would have exactly had the confidence to really calculate such a deep line from afar and then go for it and actually, you know, see that my calculations work out. I've definitely had lots of combinations in my career that didn't work out, but this one was actually quite sound. 2 rounds later in the tournament, I had this position as white. Here, black's last move was h6. And once again, I felt like I was able to rely on my newfound powers of calculation to find a pretty decisive continuation here. I'd encourage you guys to pause the video if you want to treat this like a calculation exercise. Give yourself 10-15 minutes and try to figure out how white should proceed here. So in the game, I ended up going with, well, let's call it the obvious sacrifice, knight takes f7. I started with knight takes f6 check, which basically amounts to the same thing. I should note that one move that is actually, I would say, stronger than what I did and simpler is this move queen f3. So if you found this one, nice job. I didn't even consider it during the game, but it's quite powerful, hitting the knight on f6, hitting the pawn on f7. So black cannot go knight takes g4 because we take on f7. And if black takes on g5, then we take on f6, take with the queen, and with the diagonal about to open up with d5, and with white having access to the h-file with things like king h2 and rook h1 and bishop takes g6 up in the air. Basically, the position is just lost for black. It's not the simplest thing in the world to calculate. You know, from here you got to be an engine to understand why it's like +5, +6, but okay, it's pretty clear that white has a crushing attacking position. In any case, I'm still quite proud of the combination that I came up with, starting with knight takes f6 and knight takes f7. This is indeed a pure piece sacrifice. The idea was to follow up with queen to g4, hitting the e6 pawn, but mainly the g6 pawn. This pawn on g6 is really critical for black to defend, so he played knight e7, which I was kind of expecting as the critical defense here. If rook to g8, then we can take on e6 with the queen. We can also take with the rook, and white would have a pretty powerful attack here with the 2 bishops coming in, second rook coming to e1, and black's pieces really kind of bunched up on the queen side. So knight e7, this was expected, and I'd already calculated that my planned follow-up was going to be rook takes e6, which I think is stronger than taking with the queen, because you know, queen takes e6 is just one check and the king runs over to g7, but with rook takes e6, we're kind of bringing in more pieces into the attack with rook de1, getting the second rook, or this rook in to a more active post, and keeping white's queen quite powerful on g4, just putting pressure all over the place. Not to mention this move, rook to e6, also threatens the move rook takes f6 check, with the idea of king takes f6, d5, opening up white's bishop. And that's actually a mate threat. For example, I'll just play some move for black, and if we can get d5 with check, king goes back to f7, white's queen comes in with checks and just delivers mate. So this was a pretty big threat that comes with white's last move. Black played bishop to d5, which I think I was expecting actually as the main choice here. I thought d5 might also be played, where I was just going to follow up rook du1, and I just evaluated this position as white should have a very strong attack, and I think that's correct. We have a lot of threats like rook takes f6, we want to bring the bishop back to c1. Basically, black's king side here is kind of toast. But black played bishop d5, which I think was a better defense, keeping the bishop more active in the position. And here I'd already planned to go rook takes f6, king takes, and c4. And this was basically where I stopped my calculation from afar when I played knight takes f6, knight takes f7. And again, I felt like my calculation was accurate, and I was really happy that I was just able to take a risk, go for the sacrifice. You know, it wasn't like 100% clear to me that white is winning, but it looked very good. At least I couldn't see a defense for black. And yeah, indeed, the attack turned out to be very strong. So the point here, obviously I realize I'm still down a rook, but we're hitting black's bishop on d5. If this bishop moves out of the way, then again we have the same mate threat with d5, followed by possible queen e6 check, or the queen just coming in. And in the game, black tried to just hold on to the blockade with queen to b7, giving back some material. Now white is only down the exchange, but has two very powerful bishops in the position. And finally, I was able to get d5 in, and after queen d4, white just had a huge advantage here. The attack continues, two bishops really strong, tons of compensation for the exchange, and I was able to win this one. So I felt like these two games, you know, were kind of a nice example of the types of combinations that I now felt kind of confident to execute, you know, after going through this like intense 32-day, 2-hour-a-day, you know, calculation training. And like I mentioned earlier, I think it doesn't really matter the source of the problems. And in fact, I think the method itself is like not even that important as long as you're spending that time seriously working on your chess, looking at positions, using your brain, and then trying to learn from the ideas and store them. So do I feel like I'm this completely different, you know, player like after going through the Woodpecker method? Definitely not. But do I feel like it strengthened my calculation and sharpened a lot of my patterns? Yeah, absolutely. Now, did I need to go through this exact book to get this benefit? Would I have gotten the same benefit if I had just done 30 days of, you know, 2 hours a day, chess.com, Lichess Tactics Trainer, or some other book or some other site? You know, odds are the effect might have been quite similar, but I think when you have some kind of plan and some kind of progress tracker and you're keeping track of your results, I think it just makes the whole process a lot more fun, and it makes you want to show up and actually get your training in, and yeah, makes you enjoy the actual training process and not just the results at the end of the tunnel. I definitely enjoyed streaming, going through the Woodpecker method quite a bit from start to finish. It wasn't like it was some kind of grueling process, you know, that I had to suffer through, hoping that by the end of the day, you know, at the end of the month, I would be a better player. The training itself was enjoyable, and I think that was the actual win. So would I recommend the Woodpecker method? Well, I think if you're a player somewhere in the range of like 1700 or so and up, I think it's a really good book to train your tactics. Below that level, I would say the easy section of the book is definitely suitable, but the intermediate and advanced section is going to be pretty tough and might not be the best use of your time. But if you're looking for a solid book to work on your tactics and something fun where all the problems are of course computer checked and most of them have, you know, one clear crisp solution and they all come from the games of world champions, which is, again, just a nice bonus, then it's a pretty decent book to spend your time on. And I would definitely recommend you know, tracking your results, tracking your progress, and seeing how you finish by the end of the multiple cycles. Well, guys, I hope that provides some closure, and I can just link people back to this video whenever I get asked this question. You see, if there's something I missed that, you know, I didn't follow up on, do leave a comment below, and I'll try to get back to you. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Take care.